I always believed that my dedication would be rewarded. 10 years at Maxwell and Partners had shaped my career, transforming me from an uncertain graduate to the firm's most valued marketing strategist. That evening, as colleagues gathered in the conference room adorned with congratulatory banners, I felt a rare sense of professional fulfillment. My name, Phoebe Roy, emblazoned across a cake that documented my journey at the company. A decade of brilliance deserves something special, Dylan Maxwell announced, his charismatic smile lighting up the room as he handed me a black velvet box. Inside nestled an elegant bottle of wine, its label bearing the insignia of a renowned Portuguese vineyard. "You remembered," I whispered, genuinely moved. 3 years ago, during a team retreat, I'd mentioned my passion for Portuguese wines and the sommelier course I'd completed in Porto. The fact that Dylan, the company's founder and CEO, had remembered such a personal detail made the gesture even more meaningful. "For someone who transformed our company's trajectory, it's the least I could do," Dylan replied, his hand lingering on my shoulder just a moment too long. "We should open it now. This calls for a proper celebration." Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor when I suggested saving it for later. A momentary tightening around his eyes, quickly masked by his characteristic charm. "Nonsense, Phoebe. You've earned this moment," he insisted, taking the bottle from my hands with practiced ease. He personally poured the ruby liquid into crystal glasses, ensuring mine was filled first. "To 10 more years of your brilliance," he toasted, raising his glass. The wine's aroma struck me immediately. Unlike the rich, fruity bouquet I expected from that vineyard's reserve, there was an underlying sharpness, subtle but distinct. I hesitated, my trained senses alerting me that something wasn't right. "Is everything okay?" Dylan asked, watching me closely. "The bouquet seems different from what I remember," I commented, swirling the liquid in my glass. Dylan laughed, the sound echoing a bit too loudly in the now quieting room. "That's why you're exceptional, Phoebe. Your attention to detail is unmatched." He gestured to the bottle. "This is their special reserve, very limited production. The profile is naturally more complex." His explanation made sense, and surrounded by colleagues waiting to continue the celebration, I didn't want to appear ungrateful or pretentious. I took a sip, letting the wine linger on my palate. The taste was rich and layered, but underneath lurked something unfamiliar. Not unpleasant, necessarily, just unexpected. "It's unique," I offered diplomatically, and Dylan seemed satisfied. The party continued, with colleagues sharing stories and jokes. I nursed my wine, taking small sips rather than full drinks, attributing my growing lightheadedness to exhaustion from the long week. Dylan, however, kept refilling my glass whenever it approached empty, insisting that such a rare vintage deserved proper appreciation. By the time the gathering began to disperse, the room had started to blur at the edges. My limbs felt weighted, my thoughts increasingly disconnected. I'd only had 2 glasses, far from enough to cause such disorientation. "I think I need some air," I managed to say, gripping the edge of the table as I attempted to stand. "You don't look well," Dylan observed, his voice sounding distant despite his proximity. "Let me drive you home." I wanted to refuse, to call a rideshare instead, but my mouth wouldn't form the words properly. The rational part of my brain, the part that had navigated complex business negotiations and guided major marketing campaigns, was screaming a warning that disappeared into the fog now enveloping my consciousness. "Colleagues, our guest of honor appears to have overindulged," Dylan announced smoothly to the remaining attendees. "I'll ensure she gets home safely." No one questioned him. Why would they? Dylan Maxwell was respected, trusted, a pillar of the business community known for his philanthropy and mentorship. I was being paranoid, surely. The wine, the exhaustion, the emotion of the milestone, that's all this was. The next fragments of memory came in disjointed flashes. Dylan's arm around my waist, guiding me to his car, the sleek leather interior, city lights blurring past the window, my phone slipping from my hand when I tried to check the time. His voice, reassuring but somehow different, more directive than I'd ever heard it before. "Just rest, Phoebe. I'm taking care of everything." When I finally regained full awareness, the environment was entirely unfamiliar. Not my apartment with its view of the city skyline. Not a hospital, despite the clinical atmosphere. A room with bare walls, a single window with blinds drawn tight, and Dylan sitting calmly at a desk across from me, a folder of documents spread before him. "Good, you're awake," he said, his familiar smile now seeming predatory rather than charming. "We have some important paperwork to go through." My mouth felt like cotton, my thoughts still struggling through a chemical haze. "Where am I? What's happening?" "You're exactly where you need to be," Dylan replied, sliding a document toward me along with a pen. "Now I need your signature on these papers. It's quite simple, really. Sign and everything can go back to normal." I tried to focus on the document, the words swimming before my eyes. But one phrase stood out with terrifying clarity: transfer of intellectual property and patent rights. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about celebrating my achievements. Dylan hadn't brought me here to honor my contributions. He was trying to steal my work. The revolutionary marketing algorithm I'd developed over the past 3 years. The one that would transform how companies engaged with consumers. The one I'd foolishly mentioned to him was nearly complete. "I won't sign this," I managed to say, pushing the paper away with trembling hands. Dylan's pleasant mask slipped entirely, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "I think you'll find you don't have much choice, Phoebe." He reached for his phone. "You see, right now your reputation is intact. Your colleagues respect you. Your industry admires you. But with one call, I can destroy everything you've built." The threat hung in the air between us, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly afraid. Not just for my career or reputation, but for my safety. Because as Dylan smiled at me across that desk, I realized I was facing a man I didn't know at all, and he clearly had no intention of letting me leave until he got what he wanted. "Your algorithm could revolutionize the industry, Phoebe. Did you really think I'd let someone like you take all the credit?" Dylan's words cut through my fog, each syllable dripping with condescension. I tried to stand, but my limbs refused to cooperate fully. Whatever he'd slipped into my wine hadn't completely worn off. "Someone like me?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "A woman who came from nothing. An immigrant's daughter playing in a world built by men like me." He chuckled, sorting through the papers with manicured fingers. "I gave you the platform. I mentored you. This algorithm rightfully belongs to Maxwell and Partners. To me." The casual cruelty in his voice hit harder than any physical blow could have. For 10 years, I'd believed he valued me for my intelligence and dedication. Now I understood. I'd been nothing more than a resource to exploit, a tool to be used and discarded. "The algorithm is mine," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I developed it on my own time, with my own resources. The company agreement explicitly states." "Agreements can be reinterpreted," Dylan interrupted, sliding another document toward me, "especially when one party is compromised." My blood ran cold as I forced my eyes to focus on the smartphone he now held up. On the screen was a photo of me, clearly unconscious, positioned in a way that suggested intoxication or worse. "What have you done?" "Nothing yet," he replied with terrifying casualness. "But imagine these circulating among our clients. Imagine the board seeing their marketing director incoherent, possibly on substances. Your reputation would never recover." I'd always prided myself on reading people, on understanding motivations and desires. It was what made me exceptional at my job. How had I missed the predator lurking behind Dylan's mentorship all these years? "No one would believe you," I said, though uncertainty crept into my voice. In the business world, accusations and implications were often enough to destroy careers, especially for women. Evidence and truth became secondary to perception. Really? The respected CEO versus the unstable employee? I think we both know how that story ends. He leaned forward. "Sign the papers, Phoebe. Transfer the rights to the algorithm, and this unpleasantness disappears. You keep your job, your reputation, everything you've worked for. One signature. That's all it takes." My mind raced, seeking a way out. The room appeared to be an office space I didn't recognize. possibly a property Dylan owned that wasn't associated with the company. Through the window's edge, I glimpsed trees rather than city buildings. We were somewhere remote. "I need water," I said, buying time. "And a moment to think." Dylan considered this, then nodded. "Reasonable. I've always appreciated your pragmatic nature." He stood and walked to a small refrigerator in the corner, retrieving a bottled water. Before handing it to me, he opened it and took a demonstrative sip. "See? No tricks. I'm not a monster, Phoebe. I'm a businessman making a business decision." I accepted the water with trembling hands, using the opportunity to survey the room more thoroughly. There was a door behind me, likely leading to a hallway. Another door to my right. A bathroom, perhaps. My purse sat on a side table, but I had no illusions that my phone would still be functional if I reached it. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, sipping the water cautiously. "Does it matter?" Dylan returned to his seat, watching me with the calculated interest of someone observing a chess piece rather than a person. "Let's just say I've been aware of your extracurricular project for some time. At first, I thought you'd willingly share it with the company. With me. When I realized you intended to patent it independently." He spread his hands in a gesture of false regret. Adjustments became necessary. A chill ran through me as I realized the implications. "You've been monitoring me, my work computer, my emails. Among other things," he admitted without shame. "The business world isn't for the faint of heart, Phoebe. I'd have thought you'd learned that by now." The betrayal felt intimate, violating. For years, I'd shared ideas with this man, sought his guidance, celebrated successes together, all while he watched, waiting for an opportunity like this. "What happens after I sign?" I asked, forcing my mind toward practical considerations rather than the emotional turmoil threatening to overwhelm me. "You can't keep me here forever." "Of course not. You'll return to your position, continue your excellent work." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "With appropriate supervision, naturally. And should you ever consider sharing this unfortunate episode with anyone..." He didn't need to finish the threat. The implications were clear. Sign, and become permanently under his control. Refuse, and face professional destruction and possibly worse. I took another sip of water, feeling my mind clearing incrementally. 10 years of dedication to this company, to this man's vision. Years of late nights, sacrificed weekends, relationships put on hold, all leading to this moment of ultimate betrayal. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, an idea forming. Dylan hesitated, then nodded toward the door I'd noticed earlier. 5 minutes. Leave the door unlocked." I stood carefully, testing my balance before walking to the bathroom. As expected, he watched me closely, only turning his attention back to the documents when I closed the door behind me. The bathroom was small, but modern. No window, as I'd feared. Nothing that could serve as an immediate escape route. But the mirror revealed what I needed to see. My own reflection, pale but determined. Eyes clear despite the remnants of whatever drug he'd used. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock helping to further clear my thoughts. My watch showed it was nearly midnight, at least 6 hours since the party had started. My absence wouldn't raise alarms until Monday, 2 days away. No one was coming to save me. Searching through the cabinets revealed nothing useful. Basic toiletries, nothing that could serve as a weapon or tool. But as I closed the medicine cabinet, something caught my eye in the mirror's reflection. A notification light blinking on my smartwatch. Dylan had taken my phone, but in his arrogance or oversight, he'd left my watch. A watch that, while not as functional as a phone, could still send emergency messages if I could activate it without his knowledge. A plan began to form, desperate, flawed, but the only option I had. I would pretend to capitulate, sign the documents with a deliberately incorrect signature, buy time. The watch required a specific gesture pattern to activate its emergency function, one I could potentially execute while appearing to simply be nervous or distressed. I practiced the gesture once, carefully, out of view of any possible camera. Then I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and opened the bathroom door. Dylan looked up, impatience evident. "Have you made your decision?" "I have," I replied, walking back to the chair across from him. I extended my hand for the pen, making sure my watch-wearing wrist was visible. "I'll sign your papers, Dylan." His smile was triumphant as he handed me the pen. "I knew you'd be reasonable. It's why I've always admired you, Phoebe, your practical intelligence." As I bent over the document, I deliberately dropped the pen, using the moment of distraction to activate the emergency sequence on my watch. A subtle vibration confirmed it had worked. A distress signal with my location was now transmitting to my emergency contact. I retrieved the pen, feeling the weight of Dylan's gaze. "Sorry, still a bit shaky," I apologized, forcing a submissive tone I'd never used in our decade of working together. "Take your time," he replied, the predatory satisfaction in his voice making my skin crawl. "We have all night." What Dylan didn't know as I positioned the pen above his carefully crafted documents was that my emergency contact wasn't a friend or family member who might be sleeping or unavailable. It was Sharon Winters, the company's general counsel, a woman who had mentored me when I first joined Maxwell and Partners, and who had been subtly investigating Dylan's business practices for months. The same Sharon who had warned me in carefully veiled terms to be cautious around Dylan just last week. As I began to sign my name on the first document, deliberately distorting my signature, I could only hope she would understand the alert for what it was. Not just a personal emergency, but evidence of something far more sinister at the heart of the company we both served. What I didn't anticipate was the sudden sound of a car on the gravel driveway outside, headlights briefly illuminating the room through the gaps in the blinds. Dylan's head snapped up, confusion and alarm replacing his triumphant expression. "Are you expecting company, Phoebe?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. I felt a surge of hope quickly followed by dread. Had my emergency signal brought help already? Or was this someone else entirely? Someone who might unwittingly make my situation even more perilous? Dylan moved with unexpected swiftness, snatching the papers from beneath my pen and sliding them into a desk drawer. "Don't make a sound," he hissed, his composed CEO persona evaporating. He crossed to the window, carefully peering through the blinds without disturbing them. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whoever had arrived might be my only chance at escape, but they could just as easily be Dylan's accomplice. I needed to prepare for either possibility. "It's Santiago," Dylan muttered, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "My head of security." The momentary relief I felt vanished instantly. Ryan Santiago was Dylan's personal security specialist, a former military contractor with unwavering loyalty to his employer. If he was here, it wasn't to rescue me. Dylan turned, his facade of civility returning like a mask sliding back into place. "It seems we need to accelerate our timeline. Santiago will ensure we're not disturbed while we finish our business." The sound of a door opening elsewhere in the building was followed by heavy footsteps. Dylan straightened his tie, transforming back into the polished executive known to the business world. "In here," he called out, his voice steady and controlled. The door opened, and Santiago's imposing figure filled the frame. His expression remained impassive as his gaze swept from Dylan to me. "Sir, Ms. Roy." He nodded slightly. "Is everything proceeding as planned?" "A minor delay," Dylan replied smoothly. Ms. Roy was just about to sign the transfer documents. Santiago's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed me. In our limited previous interactions at company events, he'd always been professional but distant. Now, I searched his face for any hint of humanity, any indication that he might object to what was clearly coercion. "Actually," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I was explaining to Dylan why I won't be signing anything tonight or ever." I gestured to my watch, a calculated risk. "And why help is already on the way." Dylan's laugh held no humor. "A clever bluff, Phoebe. I had your phone disabled the moment you entered my car. No calls, no texts, no traces." He turned to Santiago. "Check her watch. It seems our marketing director fancies herself a spy." Santiago approached me, reaching for my wrist. I pulled back instinctively, but his grip was firm as he examined the watch. "Standard smartwatch, sir. Connected to her phone for notifications." He pressed a button, navigating through the interface. "No active connections at present." My heart sank. The emergency feature should have worked even without phone connectivity. It was a selling point of this model. Had Dylan somehow anticipated this too? As I thought, Dylan said, satisfaction evident in his tone. Phoebe, you've always been intelligent, but not quite as clever as you believe yourself to be. He turned to Santiago. Wait outside. Ensure we're not disturbed. Santiago hesitated, his gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than necessary. Was there doubt in his eyes, or was I projecting my desperate hope onto his impassive face? Sir, he acknowledged finally, leaving the room and closing the door behind him. Dylan waited until the footsteps receded before speaking again. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the transfer of your algorithm to its rightful owner. It won't work, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. The algorithm requires implementation protocols that only exist in my head. The documentation is incomplete without my direct involvement. This wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. The core programming was documented, but the nuanced application techniques, the aspects that made it truly revolutionary, were indeed still only in my notes and thoughts. Dylan's expression tightened. Then you'll provide the complete documentation as part of our agreement. And if I refuse, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small recording device. Then I release this to the board. He pressed play, and my voice filled the room. The Reynolds account numbers don't add up. I think we need to restructure the reporting before the SEC audit. He stopped the recording, his smile cold. Selective editing can make even the most innocent conversation sound like admission of fraud. How do you think the board will react to their marketing director apparently discussing accounting manipulation? My mind raced. The conversation had been about reorganizing presentation materials for a client meeting. Nothing improper, but taken out of context. You're willing to potentially damage the company just to steal my work? I asked, genuinely astonished at the lengths he would go. The company will survive a minor scandal involving a single director, Dylan replied dismissively. Especially when that same director provides a revolutionary marketing algorithm that offsets any temporary reputational damage. The casual calculation in his voice made me realize that in Dylan's world, everything, and everyone, was ultimately expendable, including me. But something wasn't adding up. This elaborate scheme, the remote location, Santiago's presence, it seemed excessive just to force my signature on documents that any decent lawyer could contest later. What aren't you telling me, Dylan? This isn't just about the algorithm, is it? A flicker of something, surprise perhaps that I'd sensed the deeper current, crossed his face before disappearing. Perceptive as always, he acknowledged after a moment. The algorithm is valuable, certainly. But what makes it truly priceless is what it reveals about consumer psychology that other applications haven't yet discovered. Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. The pattern recognition function. You've seen my preliminary results. The algorithm I'd developed went beyond traditional marketing analytics. Its sophisticated pattern recognition could identify subtle psychological triggers in consumer behavior. Triggers that could potentially be exploited not just for marketing, but for more insidious forms of manipulation. In my research, I'd identified this potential ethical concern and built safeguards into the system. Safeguards that Dylan would undoubtedly remove. Imagine it, Phoebe, Dylan said, his voice taking on an almost reverential quality. The ability to predict and influence consumer behavior with unprecedented precision. Not just what people will buy, but how they'll vote, what causes they'll support, what leaders they'll follow. Mind control, I said flatly. That's what you're after. He winced theatrically. Such an ugly, simplistic term. I prefer behavioral architecture. But creating the conditions for people to make the choices we want them to make, while believing they've decided freely. The scale of his ambition was staggering. This wasn't about corporate profit or professional jealousy. Dylan was after something far more dangerous. Power on a scale few could imagine. I won't help you weaponize my work, I said, the fog of fear clearing as moral clarity crystallized my resolve. No matter what you threaten me with. Weaponize? Dylan echoed, appearing genuinely offended. I'm offering humanity direction, Phoebe. In a world drowning in information and division, people are desperate for guidance. We're simply providing it, invisibly and efficiently. We? I questioned. You have partners in this? His smile returned. confident and chilling. The most valuable partnerships are those that remain hidden. Suffice to say, there are individuals in both the private and public sectors who understand the potential of your work better than you do. My blood ran cold. The algorithm in the hands of corporations was dangerous enough. In the hands of governments or political operatives, it could undermine the very foundation of democratic choice. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Santiago entered without waiting for a response, his expression unreadable. "Sir, we may have a situation. Security system registered an anomaly in the perimeter sensors. I need to check it immediately." Dylan frowned. "Is it animals again? The motion sensors you installed are oversensitive." "Possibly, sir, but protocol dictates verification." Santiago's gaze flickered to me momentarily. "I recommend securing the subject while I investigate." Subject. Not Ms. Roy or her. Subject. The dehumanization sent a fresh wave of fear through me. Dylan nodded. "Proceed. I'll ensure Ms. Roy remains cooperative." As Santiago left, Dylan withdrew something from another desk drawer. Plastic restraints, the kind used by law enforcement. "A precaution," he explained, approaching me with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for his actions. "Hands in front, please." I knew that once those restraints were on, any chance of escape would vanish. My window of opportunity was closing rapidly. "Dylan," I said, trying a different approach, "think about what you're doing. This isn't you. The mentor who supported my career, who championed diversity in the company. Whatever these people have promised you, it's not worth becoming this person." Something flickered across his face. A moment of hesitation or perhaps recognition. For a heartbeat, I thought I might have reached him. Then his expression hardened again. "That idealistic fool died years ago, Phoebe. Business taught me what really matters in this world. And it isn't moral platitudes or corporate values statements. It's power. Pure and simple." He reached for my wrists, the restraints ready in his other hand. In that moment, with options exhausted and adrenaline surging, I made my decision. 10 years of corporate politeness, of strategic restraint, of being the perpetually composed professional woman, all of it fell away as survival instinct took control. I lunged sideways, grabbing the heavy crystal paperweight from his desk and swinging it with all my strength toward his outstretched arm. The impact produced a sickening crack, and Dylan howled in pain, the restraints clattering to the floor. "You broke my wrist," he gasped, clutching his injured arm. "Santiago!" he bellowed toward the door. I had seconds at most. Sprinting to the door, I yanked it open, only to collide with a solid figure rushing in the opposite direction. Santiago. I stumbled backward, certain that my momentary opportunity had vanished. But instead of restraining me, Santiago closed the door behind him and placed a finger to his lips in the universal signal for silence. Confusion paralyzed me momentarily. Dylan was still calling for assistance, his voice edged with pain and fury. "Ms. Roy," Santiago said quietly, his voice barely audible above Dylan's shouts. "I received your emergency signal. Sharon Winters sends her regards." Hope and disbelief warred within me. "You're with Sharon?" "Internal investigation, 6 months running," he confirmed briskly. "Your distress signal contained your location and confirmation of coercion, which is the evidence we needed. But we must move quickly. Others are coming. Allies of Mr. Maxwell who won't be as sympathetic to your situation." Dylan, realizing what was happening, lunged for his desk drawer. Reaching, I realized with horror, for what might be a weapon. Santiago moved with practiced efficiency, intercepting him and restraining his uninjured arm in one smooth motion. "Dylan Maxwell, as Chief of Internal Security for Maxwell and Partners, I am detaining you pending investigation of corporate espionage, blackmail, and assault." Dylan's face contorted with rage. "You work for me. I'll destroy you for this betrayal." "I work for the company, sir," Santiago corrected calmly. "And contrary to your belief, you are not the company." Relief weakened my knees, but the momentary triumph was interrupted by the distant sound of vehicles approaching on the gravel drive. Santiago's expression tightened. "That will be his private security team. They're not bound by corporate ethics or the law. He secured Dylan to the chair with his own restraints and turned to me. There's a service exit through the kitchen. My car is parked 50 meters down the road. Black sedan, keys under the front wheel well. You're not coming? I asked, sensing there was more to his plan. I need to delay them and secure evidence. He pressed a small device into my hand, a thumb drive. Everything's here. The monitoring of your work, communications with his external partners, the drugging plan. Get this to Sharon. Footsteps and voices approached from the front of the house. Go now, Santiago urged, drawing a weapon from his shoulder holster. I'll handle this. I hesitated, unwilling to leave him facing unknown numbers alone. Santiago! Ryan, he corrected, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. And Ms. Roy? I've admired your work for years. Don't let him win. Not now. With a final nod of understanding between us, I slipped through the door and into the darkened hallway, the thumb drive clutched tightly in my hand. Behind me, I heard Dylan's voice, now desperate with fury. You have no idea what you're interfering with. This goes beyond one company, beyond one algorithm. I moved as quietly as possible toward what I hoped was the kitchen, guided only by the faint ambient light and the sound of approaching danger behind me. As I reached what appeared to be the service door, a new sound froze me in place, the distinct metallic click of a gun being cocked, followed by a voice I didn't recognize. Going somewhere, Ms. Roy? The silhouette blocking my exit was tall and feminine, the gun in her hand steady and professional. As she stepped forward, moonlight from a nearby window illuminated her face, angular features framed by short silver hair. Sharon? I whispered, hardly believing my eyes. Sharon Winters, Maxwell and Partners General Counsel, lowered her weapon slightly. Phoebe, thank God. She glanced past me down the hallway. Ryan got your signal to me. Where is he? Back there, confronting Dylan. There are others coming. A sudden burst of shouting from the room I'd escaped confirmed my words. Sharon's expression hardened. The thumb drive, she demanded urgently. Do you have it? I nodded, showing her the device Santiago, Ryan, had given me. Good. She ushered me toward the exit. My car's just outside. We need to move. Now. The sound of a gunshot cracked through the house, freezing us both momentarily. My heart lurched. Ryan would want us to secure the evidence, Sharon said firmly, though concern flashed across her face. That's our priority now. She guided me through the door into the cool night air. The service exit opened onto a narrow path leading away from the main driveway, where several dark SUVs were now parked. Their headlights illuminating the front of what I could now see was an expansive country house. Dylan's security team, Sharon murmured, pulling me toward the tree line. Former military contractors, loyal only to him and his money. We moved swiftly through the shadowed landscape, guided by Sharon's small tactical flashlight. After several minutes of hurried silence, a sedan came into view, parked discreetly behind a stand of trees. Get in, Sharon instructed, unlocking the car with a remote. I'll drive. Inside the vehicle, the immediate danger receded slightly, replaced by pressing questions as Sharon started the engine and pulled away, lights off until we reached the main road. How long have you known? I asked, struggling to process everything. About Dylan? About what he was doing? Sharon kept her eyes on the road, accelerating smoothly onto the highway before answering. I've had suspicions for about a year. Strange financial movements, unusual hiring patterns and security, closed-door meetings with people who shouldn't have been in our building. She glanced at me briefly. But it was your algorithm that brought everything into focus. My algorithm? How? 6 months ago, Dylan changed, became fixated on your project, started making calls to people whose names don't appear in any public corporate registry. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Then he brought in external cybersecurity specialists to, quote, upgrade our systems. Ryan recognized one of them, a known corporate espionage specialist. That's when we started our own counter-investigation. The implications sank in slowly. He was spying on me, on my personal devices, not just my work computer. Sharon nodded grimly. We believe so. When you mentioned to Ryan last week that you were nearing completion, the surveillance on you intensified. That's why I tried to warn you. Though I couldn't be explicit without tipping our hand, I remembered her cryptic comment over coffee. Be careful what you share with Dylan these days. His interests have expanded beyond the company's welfare. At the time, I'd thought she was referencing office politics. Who is Dylan working with? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since his revelations. He mentioned partners, people in both private and public sectors. That's what we're still trying to determine, Sharon replied, checking the rearview mirror with practiced caution. But based on the fragments Ryan has gathered, we believe it's a consortium of politically connected investors. People who understand that controlling information flow is the new frontier of power. My algorithm, with its ability to identify and potentially manipulate the psychological triggers behind consumer decisions, would be invaluable to such a group. Not just for selling products, but for selling ideas, candidates, policies. Where are we going? I asked, suddenly realizing I had no idea what the plan was beyond immediate escape. Somewhere safe. A house registered to a shell company I established years ago for personal privacy. No connection to me that anyone could trace. Sharon's expression was grimly professional. We need to analyze what's on that drive and determine our next steps. As the city lights grew closer, I felt the adrenaline that had sustained me beginning to ebb, leaving room for the emotional impact of Dylan's betrayal to resurface. For 10 years, I'd poured my talent and dedication into a company led by someone who'd seen me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. I trusted him, I said softly, the words inadequate to express the depth of the violation. Sharon's expression softened momentarily. We all did, Phoebe. Dylan built his entire career on appearing trustworthy while serving only his ambitions. You're not the first person he's betrayed, just the most valuable. Her words, while meant as reassurance, sparked a new chain of thought. You said the surveillance intensified last week. That's when I mentioned finalizing the algorithm to Ryan. But how did Dylan know I was close to completion before that? I've been careful about what I shared. Sharon frowned, considering this. Perhaps someone else knew about your progress? Someone you confided in? A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I mentally reviewed the short list of people who knew details about my work. My research assistant, Harrison, who helped with data analysis but didn't have access to the core architecture. My friend Sophia from the legal department, who'd reviewed the patent application I was preparing. And Michael, I whispered, the realization hitting like a physical blow. Your deputy director? Sharon asked sharply. Michael Roy had been my right-hand person in the marketing department for 3 years. He'd been a confidant, a colleague I'd thought was a friend. We'd even dated briefly before deciding we worked better as friends and colleagues. He's the only one who knew the specific timeline, I confirmed, the pieces falling into place. 2 weeks ago, I told him I'd had a breakthrough that would accelerate completion. Sharon's expression darkened. And suddenly, Dylan knows you're close to finishing. That's not a coincidence. Michael wouldn't... I started automatically, then stopped. Would he? The man I thought I knew wouldn't betray me to Dylan. But then, the Dylan I thought I knew wouldn't have drugged and kidnapped me. People have complex motivations, Sharon said, as if reading my thoughts. Ambition, resentment, fear. Dylan is skilled at identifying and exploiting people's vulnerabilities. We lapsed into silence as the reality of this additional betrayal sank in. If Michael had been feeding information to Dylan, how much did he know about tonight's plan? Was he actively involved, or merely an informant? Your phone, Sharon said suddenly. Where is it? Dylan took it, said it had been disabled. But your watch wasn't, she pointed out. Which means either Dylan was overconfident or he wanted the watch to remain functional, I finished, the implications chilling, as a tracking device. Sharon's response was immediate and decisive. She pulled into a gas station parking lot, killed the engine, and turned to me. The watch. Remove it. Now. I unstrapped the device, handing it to her. Without hesitation, she opened her window and crushed it under her heel against the pavement outside. We need to assume they have other means of tracking us, she said, restarting the car and pulling back onto the road. Change of plans. We'll stop at a place I know to clean ourselves up, check for additional devices. and secure that drive before proceeding to the safe house. The systematic way she approached the threat was simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. This wasn't theoretical corporate espionage or abstract danger. These were people with resources, connections, and clearly few moral boundaries. 20 minutes later, we pulled into an unremarkable storage facility on the outskirts of the city. Sharon guided us to a specific unit, unlocking it to reveal not storage, but a small, efficiently organized space that looked like a cross between a workshop and an emergency room. "Ryan's idea," she explained, leading me inside and securing the door behind us. A fallback position, off the grid and off the books. The space contained basic medical supplies, changes of clothing, communication equipment, and various technical devices I didn't recognize. "Strip," Sharon instructed matter-of-factly, handing me a set of plain clothes. "Everything you're wearing needs to be checked for trackers." As I changed, Sharon ran a handheld device over my discarded clothing, pausing when it emitted a soft beep over my blazer. "Found one," she said grimly, extracting a tiny object from the lining near the collar. "Sophisticated. Military grade." She crushed it under her shoe next to another device she must have found on her own person. How long has Dylan been planning this? I wondered aloud, the scale of his preparation becoming increasingly clear. "That's what concerns me," Sharon admitted, setting up a laptop on a small desk. "This level of preparation suggests he's not just after your algorithm. It's part of something larger." She inserted the thumb drive Ryan had given me into the laptop, her expression intent as she navigated through the files. "My God," she whispered after several minutes of scanning documents. "Phoebe, this goes beyond corporate espionage. These communications, Dylan has been in contact with private intelligence firms, behavioral psychology specialists, even officials in regulatory positions." I moved to look over her shoulder, scanning the documents. Emails, meeting notes, financial transfers, all pointing to a coordinated effort spanning months, if not years. They're building an infrastructure, I realized, the scope of the plan becoming clear. A private system for mass influence using my algorithm as the predictive engine. Sharon nodded grimly. And with the regulatory capture evidenced here, they'd be operating with practical immunity. No oversight, no accountability. A series of photos appeared on screen. Surveillance images of me entering my apartment, meeting friends for coffee, working late in my office. The invasion of privacy was profound and disturbing. "We need to get this to the authorities," I said, the weight of the evidence overwhelming. "Which authorities?" Sharon countered, gesturing to a document showing connections to high-level government officials. "Dylan has connections throughout the system. We need to be strategic about who we approach and how." She continued scanning files, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "There's mention here of something called Project Eclipse, scheduled to launch next week. Whatever they're planning, it's imminent." A sudden pounding on the storage unit door made us both freeze. "Federal agents! Open up!" a voice commanded from outside. Sharon and I exchanged alarmed glances. There had been no sirens, no warning, just the sudden appearance of supposed federal authorities. "Back door," Sharon whispered, gesturing to a panel I hadn't noticed. "Emergency exit. Take the drive." She ejected the thumb drive, pressing it into my palm as the pounding continued. "What about you?" I asked. "I'll delay them. Create confusion about who was here and where you've gone." She gripped my shoulders. "Find Ryan's contact in the Justice Department, Amanda Ramirez. Her information is on the drive. Trust no one else." The door shuddered under another impact. They were trying to break it down. "Go," Sharon urged. "What's on that drive could protect or destroy countless lives, depending on whose hands it falls into. You're the only one who fully understands what your algorithm can do in the wrong hands." With a final nod of resolution, I slipped through the exit panel into a narrow corridor that appeared to run between storage units. Behind me, I heard the main door crash open, followed by Sharon's authoritative voice demanding identification and warrants. As I navigated the dark passage, guided only by emergency lighting, a terrible realization settled over me. In less than 24 hours, my entire life had been upended. My work, meant to help understand human behavior, had become the centerpiece of a conspiracy to manipulate it on a mass scale. My mentor had revealed himself as a predator. My colleague was likely a traitor. And now, with unknown forces closing in, I was alone with the evidence that could expose it all, if I could stay alive long enough to use it. The passage ended at a metal door marked with an exit sign. Pressing it open cautiously, I emerged into an alley behind the storage facility. In the distance, I could see official-looking vehicles blocking the main entrance. Black SUVs with tinted windows rather than marked police cars. Not federal agents, then. Or at least, not ones operating in an official capacity. I slipped the thumb drive into my sock for safekeeping and moved purposefully toward the street, fighting the urge to run, which would only draw attention. My mind raced through options. I needed transportation, communication, and most urgently, a way to verify Amanda Ramirez's legitimacy before approaching her. As I reached the sidewalk, headlights approached. A taxi, its light illuminated to indicate availability. A stroke of luck I desperately needed. Hailing it, I slid into the back seat, mind racing to identify a destination that would give me time to think and plan. "The Westfield Mall, please," I instructed, selecting a busy public location where I could potentially lose myself in crowds while figuring out my next move. The driver nodded, pulling away from the curb. As the taxi merged into traffic, I glanced back toward the storage facility, where a confrontation was unfolding. Through the distance and darkness, I could make out Sharon, surrounded by men in dark suits, gesturing emphatically. I turned away, forcing myself to focus on what came next. Find a secure way to access the drive's contents. Locate Amanda Ramirez. Expose the conspiracy before Project Eclipse could launch. It was only when the taxi turned onto the highway, heading in the opposite direction from the mall I'd requested, that I realized something was wrong. "Excuse me?" I called to the driver. "You're going the wrong way." The driver's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, and a chill ran through me at his response. "No, Ms. Roy. For the first time tonight, you're finally going exactly where you're supposed to go." My body tensed as the taxi accelerated onto the highway, fight-or-flight instincts surging. The driver, mid-30s, broad-shouldered, with military precision to his movements, kept me fully in view. "Who are you?" I demanded, calculating the risks of opening the door at highway speed. "Someone who wants the same thing you do, Ms. Roy," he replied calmly. "To stop Dylan Maxwell and Project Eclipse." He identified himself as Daniel Foster, Special Investigations Unit, Department of Justice. He knew about the thumb drive Ryan had given me and the tracking devices Sharon had found. "Where's Ryan? And Sharon?" I asked. "Santiago's status is unknown. He delayed Maxwell's security team, but we lost contact afterward," Foster replied. "Winters is secure, but being questioned by individuals falsely presenting themselves as federal agents." Falsely? The implications were disturbing. Some of them are actual federal agents, just not operating in an official capacity. Maxwell's consortium has deep connections. Foster checked his mirrors vigilantly. "Our priority is getting you and the evidence to Ramirez. She has enough authority and the right political connections to protect both." As we drove, Foster explained that Project Eclipse was scheduled to coincide with the upcoming gubernatorial debate, the perfect high-profile event to deploy a psychological influence system. "It's worse than influencing one election," I said as the realization hit me. Once deployed, the system could be applied to any public discourse. It would create an invisible architecture of influence most people wouldn't even recognize was affecting them. "And you developed this capability?" Foster's tone carried no judgment. "I developed an algorithm to understand consumer psychology more deeply," I clarified defensively. "The ethical application would help create products that genuinely meet unrecognized needs. That's why I built fail-safes, ethical constraints that prevent exploitation. Constraints Dylan would remove." Foster nodded. "The road to dystopia is paved with technological innovations divorced from their ethical frameworks." We arrived at an upscale apartment building, where Foster led me through an underground garage to a service elevator. Amanda Ramirez, a woman in her early 40s with intelligent eyes and a crisp pantsuit, greeted us in a minimally furnished apartment. To earn my trust, She initiated a video call with Ryan, whose face was bruised but alert. "Phoebe," he greeted me with relief. "Ramirez and Foster are legitimate. You can trust them with the evidence." I handed over the thumb drive, which Ramirez connected to an air-gapped system. While she analyzed the data, Foster offered me food and tea, reminding me that the drug Dylan used could leave my blood sugar unstable. Ramirez returned with a grave expression. "The evidence is substantial. Financial transfers, surveillance operations, communications with foreign entities. But we're missing the technical specifications of your algorithm. Without understanding precisely how it works, we can't counter its deployment." Dylan knew that, I realized. It's why he needed me to cooperate, not just the stolen documentation. The door suddenly burst open with explosive force. Armed figures in tactical gear flooded in, but they weren't targeting us. They were securing the perimeter. Michael Roy, my deputy and apparent betrayer, stepped through the shattered doorway wearing a tactical vest. "Stand down," he called to Foster and Ramirez, displaying a badge. "National security override." To my shock, they lowered their weapons. "Hello, Phoebe," Michael said, meeting my gaze. "I imagine you have questions." A slightly hysterical laugh escaped me. "Questions? You betrayed me to Dylan. I've been feeding him carefully selected information as part of a multi-agency operation." Michael interrupted gently. "An operation your escape tonight has jeopardized." "Your what?" "Law enforcement? National Security Agency, Special Technology Assessment Division," he confirmed. "Dylan Maxwell has been under investigation for his connections to foreign intelligence services. When your algorithm appeared on our radar 18 months ago, I was assigned to monitor and protect both you and it. The betrayal transformed into a different kind of violation. Our entire relationship was just a cover?" Pain flickered across Michael's face. "The assignment was professional. What developed between us wasn't." Foster cleared his throat. "Maxwell knows the thumb drive is missing. We need to move now. If you're NSA and their Justice Department, why the separate operations?" I asked. "Compartmentalization," Ramirez explained. "Standard procedure when you don't know how high the corruption reaches. Maxwell's consortium has connections that penetrate multiple government agencies." "What happens now?" I asked, exhausted. "We extract you to a secure facility where you can help us counter the algorithm before Project Eclipse deploys," Michael answered. "You're asking me to trust you," I observed, "after discovering my entire life has been manipulated and surveilled." Michael met my gaze. "I'm asking you to help us prevent your work from being weaponized against millions. Whatever you feel about me, I know you don't want that on your conscience." He was right. I'll help. But when this is over, I want the complete truth. The sound of approaching helicopters interrupted us. A tactical team member rushed in. Multiple aircraft incoming. Unmarked, but likely private military contractors. "Maxwell's escalating," Ramirez said grimly. "Phoebe, is there anywhere you stored backup information about your algorithm?" Michael asked urgently. I remembered my grandmother's advice. "Keep something vital in a place connected only to your heart, Lizzie." "Yes," I replied. "There's a place, but I'll need to go personally." As we fled through service corridors, I realized that within one night, my entire existence had transformed. My career, my research, my relationships, all irrevocably altered. What I hadn't told them was that my backup wasn't just technical specifications. It was something potentially more valuable. The one critical vulnerability I'd discovered in my algorithm. A flaw that could transform it from a tool of invisible influence to a means of revealing that influence. An algorithmic vaccine against its own potential for abuse. Dawn was breaking as our unmarked van navigated through the awakening city. Michael sat beside me, tension evident in his rigid posture as he coordinated with his team through a secure communication device. Ramirez and Foster followed in a separate vehicle, creating a split target in case we were tracked. "ETA 5 minutes, the driver announced as we approached the outskirts of Chinatown, where weathered buildings carried the weight of generations. "This is the location?" Michael asked quietly, glancing at me with poorly concealed surprise. I nodded, feeling strangely calm now that we were approaching my grandmother's sanctuary. Not everything valuable looks important from the outside. We stopped before a modest building housing the Golden Lotus tea shop on its ground floor. The windows displayed traditional clay teapots and ornate canisters, the kind tourists often purchased as souvenirs. "Wait here," I instructed, stepping from the vehicle. Michael caught my arm. "Phoebe, we don't have time for—" "I go alone, or we don't go at all," I interrupted firmly. "The security system won't recognize anyone else." After a moment of clear internal struggle, he released my arm. 5 minutes. Then we come in. I pushed through the shop's weathered door, a small bell announcing my entrance. The familiar scent of jasmine and oolong tea enveloped me, momentarily transporting me back to childhood afternoons spent watching my grandmother carefully measure leaves while sharing stories of resilience and wisdom. The elderly woman behind the counter looked up, recognition lighting her eyes. "Mei Li," she greeted me, using my Chinese name, the one my grandmother had given me, not the westernized Phoebe I used professionally. "Auntie Wu," I responded with a respectful nod. Though not actually related to me, Wu Li Fen had been my grandmother's closest friend and the keeper of her most important legacy, this shop and what it concealed. "It has been many years," she observed in Mandarin. "You come for your grandmother's treasure?" "Yes," I confirmed in the same language. "Times of need have arrived." She studied me for a moment, then turned to the wall of tea canisters behind her. With practiced movements, she selected 3 specific containers and arranged them in a precise pattern on the counter. "Your grandmother said you would know," she stated simply. I did know. Grandmother's lessons had always contained hidden meanings, stories within stories. I opened each canister, extracting not tea leaves but folded papers containing seemingly random sequences of numbers. Together, they formed the combination to a hidden safe. Moving to a particular shelf display, I rearranged certain teapots in the specific sequence the papers indicated. A soft click rewarded my efforts as a concealed panel in the shop's floor unlocked. Auntie Wu retreated to the front door, flipping the sign to "closed" and drawing the blinds. "I will watch," she said. "Take what you need." The hidden compartment contained a small safe, which I opened using the final sequence from the papers. Inside lay an encrypted external hard drive and a handwritten journal, my private documentation of the algorithm's development, including the critical vulnerability I'd discovered during testing. During the algorithm's creation, I'd identified a fascinating paradox. When the system detected manipulation attempts and alerted the target, it created a psychological immune response, making the person resistant not only to the current influence attempt, but to future ones as well. In essence, once people realized they were being manipulated, the manipulation lost its power. I documented this vulnerability, but kept it separate from my main research, uncertain of its implications. Now, it had become our greatest hope. As I secured these items, rapid footsteps approached from the back of the shop. I turned defensively, only to find Michael entering through a rear door, weapon drawn. "We need to move," he stated urgently. "Maxwell's teams have established a search perimeter. They're going building to building." I nodded, thanking Auntie Wu with a quick embrace before following Michael through the back exit. Instead of returning to the van, we diverted through a narrow alley where Foster waited in a different vehicle. "Ramirez is coordinating with a secure facility," Foster explained as we pulled away. "The gubernatorial debate is in 12 hours. We need to implement a countermeasure before then." "I can do it," I said with newfound confidence, clutching my grandmother's legacy to my chest. "But we'll need to infiltrate the broadcast system." Michael exchanged a look with Foster. "That's already arranged. We have assets at the broadcast center." For the next several hours in a makeshift operations center within a federal building, I worked feverishly to code a countermeasure based on my documented vulnerability. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would allow Project Eclipse to activate during the debate broadcast, but inject my countermeasure code into the same data stream. Instead of blocking the manipulation, we would reveal it, making the algorithm's influence visible to viewers through subtle visual cues. Once people recognized they were being manipulated, the effect would backfire, creating a wave of resistance to such techniques. "It's ready," I announced finally, passing the completed code to the technical team. Once implemented, Project Eclipse won't just fail, it will inoculate millions against similar manipulation attempts. Michael squeezed my shoulder gently. You're essentially turning their weapon against them. Poetic justice, I replied. As the debate hour approached, tension mounted in the operations center. Reports confirmed that Dylan had evaded capture and was coordinating with his consortium from an unknown location. Our agents at the broadcast center had successfully integrated my countermeasure into the transmission system, but nothing was certain until the moment of activation. The debate began, and for 30 minutes, nothing unusual occurred. Had we misunderstood the timeline? Then, during a particularly contentious exchange between candidates, our monitoring systems detected it, the subtle digital signatures of the algorithm activating within the broadcast. They've initiated Project Eclipse, the technical lead announced. Countermeasure deploying now. On screens throughout the operations center, we watched as the debate continued, but now with almost imperceptible indicators surrounding manipulative content, highlighting emotional triggers being exploited. To our team, briefed on what to look for, these signals were obvious. To the general public, they would register subconsciously at first, then with increasing awareness. Social media exploded within minutes as viewers began noting strange patterns in the broadcast. What started as confused observations quickly evolved into collective recognition of the manipulation attempt. It's working, Ramirez breathed, watching the cascade of awareness spread across monitoring screens. The public is identifying the manipulation signatures themselves now. Reports began flooding in from our field teams. The consortium's operatives were in disarray, attempting to shut down the algorithm but unable to counter the rapid spread of awareness. 3 hours after the debate ended, Ryan Santiago arrived at the operations center, arm in a sling but otherwise intact. Maxwell is on the move, he reported. Private jet at the executive airport, scheduled for immediate departure. Not happening, Ramirez responded, already on her secure line. All flights grounded, federal hold. Within the hour, news arrived. Dylan Maxwell had been apprehended while attempting to board his aircraft. Simultaneously, coordinated raids were targeting key members of his consortium across 3 countries. In the relative quiet that followed, Michael found me alone in a small conference room, staring out at the city lights. You did it, he said simply. We did it, I corrected, though I'm still processing who we actually includes. He leaned against the window beside me. I owe you that explanation. Yes, I agreed. You do. Over the next hour, Michael revealed the full scope of the operation. How he'd been assigned to monitor my work after initial intelligence identified its potential for misuse, how his role had evolved from surveillance to protection as the consortium's interest grew more dangerous. Was anything real? I asked finally, the question that had been burning inside me. Michael was quiet for a long moment. My assignment was real. My professional respect for your brilliance was real. He met my gaze directly. My feelings for you became real, though they weren't supposed to. That's why I requested reassignment 3 months ago. I remembered that period, his sudden distance, the professional cooling I'd attributed to our brief romantic involvement. I couldn't maintain objectivity, he continued, but my request was denied. The operation was too critical, and there was no one else positioned to protect you from the inside. His honesty didn't erase the violation of trust, but it offered context I hadn't had before. The world I'd thought I understood had been revealed as far more complex, with layers of hidden agendas and competing interests. What happens now? I asked. Officially? Witness protection until the trials conclude. Your testimony will be crucial in prosecuting Maxwell and dismantling the consortium. He hesitated. After that, it's your choice. With your abilities, any intelligence agency would welcome you, or you could disappear into private life under a new identity. Both options felt hollow. A life defined either by the shadow world of intelligence or by perpetual hiding. There's a third option, I suggested. I could continue my work, but with full transparency. Create ethical frameworks for these technologies before others develop them with fewer scruples. Michael smiled slightly. Always the innovator. In the days that followed, As the full scope of the conspiracy became public and the world grappled with this new form of attempted manipulation, I found clarity emerging from chaos. The betrayal that had shattered my world had also freed me from illusions about power and how it operated in the shadows. 6 months later, I testified against Dylan Maxwell from behind a privacy screen, detailing his attempts to weaponize my algorithm for mass manipulation. His consortium had largely collapsed under international investigation, though certain elements remained elusive. Rather than disappearing into witness protection, I accepted a position with a newly formed International Ethics Commission on Cognitive Security, using my unique understanding to help create safeguards against future manipulation attempts. Michael and I maintained a cautious professional relationship, the complex history between us neither fully resolved nor entirely abandoned. Trust, once shattered, rebuilds slowly, if at all. On the anniversary of that fateful celebration dinner, I visited the Golden Lotus Tea Shop, where Auntie Wu greeted me with her knowing smile. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said, serving traditional oolong in delicate cups. "You turned betrayal into strength, just as she did in her time." I sipped the fragrant tea, thinking of all the hidden stories my grandmother had carried, the resilience she'd built through her own encounters with those who abused power. "The most dangerous weapon against corruption," Auntie Wu continued, "is not force, but light. You brought light." Outside, the city continued its rhythm, most citizens unaware of how close they'd come to invisible manipulation, or that a vulnerability purposefully preserved had become their protection. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately led to something greater, a chance to ensure that the human mind remained free from invisible influence, and the knowledge that even the most sophisticated manipulation could be defeated by awareness and truth. My grandmother had been right all along. Keep something vital in a place connected only to your heart, not just information, but the core values that define who you truly are, regardless of what masks others may wear. In a world of shifting loyalties and hidden agendas, that remained the one truth I could always trust.